Welcome to the magical journey beyond mediocrity, where the mystical and the practical become aligned. You're listening to Meant for More, the Seeker's Guide to Success, with your host, Seeker's Guide and coach, Kristen Lloyd. Kristen guides you through mindset shifts to increase your consciousness and live your best life. So let's leave mediocrity behind and step into your magical, magnificent life with Kristen.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to Meant for More, the Seeker's Guide to Success. I am your host and Seeker's Guide, Kristen Lloyd. I am so thankful, grateful that you have all tuned in for the show today. I am always excited for this show, and every episode is getting better and better. This is episode 8 of the Meant for More show, and today our special guest is Dee Reller. Dee is a business coach, online strategist, and technical mentor to aspiring service-based female entrepreneurs. She's a straight shooter mixed with compassionate nurturer who straddles the fence between right brain creative and left brain analyzer. Dee helps women stop spinning in a startup overwhelm, demystifying the process and the tech overwhelm so they can make their business vision a reality and live a liberated life. Welcome, Dee, to the show.
Thank you, Kristen. I'm excited to be here.
I'm so excited that you are here. I reached out to you because you have a very different background from many of the service-based entrepreneurs that I've talked to, that I've encountered. And so I was so excited to share your story and your journey to Meant for More because it's so different, because you didn't come necessarily from a service-based background. And so I'm excited to hear about your journey to more. And I know that our listeners are as well. So I think that's probably an excellent place to start is, what has been your journey to Meant for More? How have you been a seeker? And tell us a little bit about your background and how you got to where you are.
Sure. That actually was a block for me at first coming into coaching because I felt like I wasn't coming from the traditional route into coaching, and I thought that people wouldn't get it. But it's actually turned out that I can use my technical background with my coaching to really help women with starting their businesses. So my background is, so my seeking journey probably started very young. I have been on my own since before I graduated high school. And so really in my early 20s was really just about surviving. And I think that mode stayed with me for a very, very long time. And it's not until the last couple of years where I really feel like I'm starting to thrive in what I'm supposed to do. But in that, I started out doing retail management, and then that transitioned into managing a medical office at a teaching hospital. And then I ended up in a position where I was helping a nonprofit manage their donor database and their technical computer systems for their office. Because as with a nonprofit, they don't have a lot of money. And so I got to the point where I was like, well, I'm kind of good at this. And I had gotten really tired of people telling me that I couldn't move up because I didn't have a college degree. So what I ended up doing was I ended up going to work for a large company, kind of at the bottom of the rung in their technology in their IT department, and also went to put myself through a college. So that went on for a long time, and I ended up in the IT world for over 15 years doing systems analyst work and project management for projects anywhere from, 10K to 10 million. So, but probably in the late 1990s, I was really starting to feel like I had just been doing kind of what I was good at, not really what I felt like I was here to do. And I think that was just because I was conditioned to be in this survival mode versus really looking at, what we're here to do. And so it kind of became a journey. And then I got introduced to the coaching world, and it was really intriguing to me. And in the fall of 2013, I think it was, some things just kind of lined up. It was really the universe sending me messages in multiple ways. I got to attend a weekend at IPAC, which is one of the top coach training programs in the country. And I got to attend their first free weekend to get a gist of what that was all about. And I just loved it. So I enrolled in that and started my coach training. And I just, like, every time I was in it, I was just really, really lit up. Like, we would have we had a number of 3-day training weekends. And typically by the end, people are just so drained from the training. And I just was so lit up. And I was like, this is what I meant to do. But I kind of thought that I would sort of transition into my coaching business part-time while I was still working. But the universe, in its mysterious ways, had other ideas. And a couple months after I started my training, some things happened at the company that I was working with. And I had been there for 7.5 years. And my previous company I'd been with for 9. So I don't make really rash decisions. But within 48 hours, I had given notice because I just had enough. And mind you, I didn't have a plan. I didn't have a huge savings or anything, but I just felt like I kind of got backed into a corner where I felt like I was being asked to do things that were very much against my integrity. And then a couple months after that, my relationship kind of imploded, and I had been living in this same city for almost 20 years. And I just got I was just like, I need a clean break. I packed everything up in storage, took what I could, put it in my car, and I have pretty much been a digital nomad for the last 2 years.
That's amazing. And the thing that that sticks out to me is this idea of being in survival mode, from the beginning. And so leaving a position, clearly, again, you're back into a corner, but the idea of leaving a position, that's not something that necessarily somebody in survival mode does. So how did you, it sounds like you had a huge transformation in terms of being in survival mode, living on other people's terms, to living on your terms and working yourself out of that. I'm not saying that you haven't utilized the survival skills in the last couple of years as a digital nomad.
Right.
But how have they really impacted you as not only in your life before becoming an entrepreneur, but also since becoming an entrepreneur?
The survival skills specifically?
Yeah.
Is that what
Yeah.
So I think it was, I think that there was a few things that happened. That last year that I had been at the company, I got to the 6-figure mark, and this is not something we need to go into, but I think all of us that head down this entrepreneurial path have to address our money blocks. And I think I think while it was probably subconscious, me hitting a 6-figure mark in my corporate job was actually extremely uncomfortable for me. And while I have been in the corporate world and it has felt like it's just been kind of something I've been doing, it wasn't really thought out. I've just been, doing what I was doing. I was also in positions though where I could still be myself to a certain extent. So if you look at my website, you'll see I typically have some form of purple hair. And in my last job, even though it was corporate, I still had purple hair when I was there. So like I still have a need to sort of be able to be myself, and I was very fortunate in the corporate world to have that to a certain extent. And the last person that I was working for the last 6 months, I was really struggling to do that. And I think I just got backed into a corner that I just couldn't function like that.
You mean the congruency of who you are with what you were doing?
Yeah. So, I mean, even in the corporate world, I was still what I would call service-based. Like I was sort of that mediator between the business units and the IT world. I was kind of that interpreter and everything. So I still felt like I was being of service to people, helping, right? Like I have helped and been a problem solver since I was a child. And I think that that's why I've naturally grown into the coaching world. But those last 6 months of work, I didn't feel like I was able to do that.
Right.
In any way, shape, or form. And so I think that that's when, your survival stuff sort of kicks in, when you really feel like you are backed into a corner and you don't have anywhere to go. You know what I mean?
Right, right. And I think it's also, what's also really interesting is women in tech. I mean, that's not necessarily, our topic for today, but I just want to bring up that there are not many women in tech. And to take your background in technology with all that you've known and to have gone that path, like you said, the universe had other plans for you. I think that it's very interesting that your journey led you into retail, into, medical office management, and then into information technology, and now into entrepreneurship, because that's where there seems to be a really big gap in the field of coaching, is this idea of technology. In addition, women in technology has been well known as a gap in the field. Like that is well known that there are not many women in tech. And so there has been in recent years, and I'm looking for the word, the drive to get more women into the sciences, into technology, because that's where I think it's a very male-dominated industry. And so yes. What was your experience, or your calling to move from a predominantly male-dominated industry to helping women entrepreneurs? Because that's a shift, right? You're in this very male-dominated industry, and then you shift to helping women. Was there an internal transformation for you that you experienced, or was it just basically your heart's calling that meant for more?
I think that yes, the IT world is very male-dominated. And there's certain aspects of the IT world where women tend to gravitate towards, project management, being those mediaries and things like that. just because that kind of, the relationship building is not what I would call a typical IT personality.
Absolutely.
But women fit really well in there. And I have to say, when I first started coaching, my peers that I went through training with would ask me how to help them get online. And that's really how this transition started, because I really was sort of trying to draw a line in the sand between my IT and my coaching and leave the IT behind, because I didn't think people would get that transition. But as I started to work with them to help them understand the online world, I was like, I can really take all of my experience and meld it. And we can talk a little bit in a minute, but I think that's something that everybody needs to look at in terms of the transition. Otherwise, in why I wanted to help women is, I think a lot of it stems from my own personal family background. I have a lot of amazing women in my family that are super strong and have just lived through so much, but again, have very much been in that survival mode, and they've been settling. And I really want to help women realize that they don't have to settle. They don't have to survive. I don't really think that that's what we're here to do on this earth, is to just be here and survive. And so I think that for what I will say, not necessarily the millennial generation, they've grown up more with technology. But when you're talking about, mid 30s and up,
the Gen Xers.
Yeah. I think that the technology in terms of getting online, what to do, what to focus on, really tends to hold women back from sharing their expertise, their experience, their wisdom. And I feel like there are just so many women who have so much to share, and I don't want that to be a barrier. Like I think our younger generations need to hear from them. They need what they have to offer, and I want to help them be able to do that and not have, the confusion and overwhelm of the online world prevent them from doing that.
Right. And the idea of survival, it seems to be like a theme that's coming up, just because I think that there are many women who are really stuck in the old pattern, in the old model of this is all that I can do. Mm-hmm. And instead of really creating their own path. And I think those who are on the seeker's journey, as I like to call it, or that they're recognizing that, hey, there's more for me out there. And the idea of meant for more is I don't have to stay in the box. I don't have to live on other people's terms. I can create a path of my own. I think that's where we shift. I don't like the word victim, but that's the only word that really comes up to mind. You shift from being a product of a system. That's a better mm-hmm. phrase. A product of a system, instead of taking your power back and putting yourself in the driver's seat of your own life. So, whether you're a passenger going along for the ride versus taking back your own power and saying, okay, this is what I'm going to do. This is who I want to be, who I want to become, and work through it. Because, and I know that and I know as an entrepreneur, the entrepreneurial journey is not an easy one. And it's an internal journey much more than an external one, because it really tell me what you think about this. You're confronted with your own demons. You're confronted with your own inner challenges. And I think that that's something that's very important for people to recognize is this is not, I know that there are a lot of people that are 0 to 6 figures and, God bless them, but there's a path there that's not just like you flip a switch.
Yeah, absolutely. And it hasn't been a quick journey for me either. I do think that the entrepreneurial path is one of the deepest dives in personal development that you can take.
Right.
And for me, like when I quit my job, put all my stuff in storage, put all my stuff in the car and just took off, I had a lot of people, saying, well, she's having a midlife crisis. You know what I mean? And I don't think it's that. I think it isn't. I think the seeker's journey, the hero's journey, the heroine's journey, however you want to look at it, is a very natural thing that we all get to. You'll hear some say like midlife crisis or even the, quarter century crisis. And I think that is our internal knowing, our higher power, trying to knock on our door saying, hey, you're supposed to be on a different path. You know what I mean?
Right.
But if you happen to feel like your path leads to the entrepreneurial journey, be ready, because what I don't think people really understand is that the most difficult parts of starting a business like this is not, it's not the tech. It's not the tactics. It's not the process. It is the internal work that you have to go through, because it is so much different to be selling yourself and your services than it is to be going in every day and taking a paycheck, right?
Totally.
We can go in and we can go to a job and we can think, we're totally worth more and, we're looking for a raise or whatever. But when it comes to asking somebody to pay for our services as a coach or a consultant or an online service provider, it's totally different. Like it's just totally different. And in working with my clients, I will say to them when we're talking about raising their prices and things, and I'm like, well, what if you were working a job and, it was time for a raise? And they start to think about that because it's a totally different mindset, right?
Completely.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great perspective. And I think that even for some people, even with the clients that I've worked with, that asking for a raise is still uncomfortable because even though they know, quote unquote, they're worth it or they deserve it or they earned it or whatever phrase you want to use, asking for it and possibly being rejected is so deep emotionally.
Yes.
And so you hit the nail on the head, I think. I think that's, the internal journey is, like you said, so much bigger than the tech. So now my next question to you is, what are the top 3 things that you learned about yourself on your own internal journey? And after that, I'll ask your advice for our listeners who are maybe taking this journey. But what do you think you learned about yourself? The top 3 things, or more or less, that really impacted you coming into your own as an entrepreneur?
So I think one thing is that like in the corporate world, like when I was managing projects, like I am a very direct, straight shooter, even in my coaching. I'm not one to really beat around the bush, although I have a very nurturing side. I have 7 younger brothers and sisters. So
wow.
Grown up with that just personality. But I am very straight shooter. So, and when it would come to managing a project, or now with my clients, when it comes to working with them and supporting them, like I'm, 120% in, and I'm going to be very, very fierce about that. But when it came to myself, that wasn't the case. That wasn't the case at all. And so I really had to look at this I really kind of had to shift that, I'm worth it. I'm worthy of doing this. I'm great at what I do. I have a lot to offer. I really had to shift that because, I was like a bulldog when it comes to somebody else, or when it comes to protecting somebody else, or working, on somebody else's vision. But when it came to my own, I really had to shift that. I think the other thing definitely is, and I think probably every woman that I have talked to or worked with, we all have to address our money issues. Like it's just one of those things
For sure.
that comes up at some point in time. I think the third thing is, I think the third thing was really paying attention to my own internal wisdom. I got really sidetracked in the beginning with comparing to everybody else, and not paying attention to my internal knowing, and I got super overwhelmed. And I think some of that comes from, your history. So at some point in time, you might have had something that didn't go so great, and we tend to carry those failures forward instead of just letting them go and focusing on what we can do and what we can become. So I think it was really tapping into my internal knowing and starting to trust myself again, especially when it comes to figuring out who you're going to be online, because the way that you stand out online is by being you, and you're only going to know that if you're tapping in internally.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And so, with that, there are many, I know that whether it's our listeners or other women who start off on the journey and they say, oh, I feel like I'm meant for more. I'm ready to start this journey. And whatever that means for them, it could be going back to school. It could be starting a family. It could be, moving across the world. It doesn't necessarily need to be entrepreneurship. But for individuals who have that feeling that they're meant for more, what would you advise them to do or to be? Or, what is your advice to them?
I think the first thing is to get super, super curious about what it is that that you might want to do. Like I do think it's that beginning of the internal journey, and taking a look at, because some of us we do sort of dismiss kind of all of our experiences and sometimes our expertise. And I will tell you that all of that stuff is what's going to be part of what's going to make them stand out. So really look at, really start to get curious about yourself and what you want to do and what lights you up, and what can you talk about all day long, or what do you focus when you want to read something? What does your bookshelf look like? Things like that. because I think one of the biggest things when starting out that people struggle with and don't realize, because they sort of go from like 1 to 100 in terms of, okay, they get this idea right, and then they go to, well, how do I start bringing money in? And they skip this whole clarity piece.
Right.
And I talk about 4 pillars of clarity, and it's really like, if you don't have the clarity about who you are, what your message is that you're trying to get out there, who you want to serve, and what you're offering, the clients aren't going to come. The money isn't going to come because they're not going to be clear about who you are and what you do if you aren't.
So what are those 4 pillars of clarity?
So it's, what is your vision, and why are you doing it? Who is it that you want to serve? And exactly what is your messaging? Because, and it's not just so in the entrepreneurial world, you tend to attract clients. They're looking for you to solve a problem, right? But a lot of times we know that there's something else there that they need, but they're not.
Yeah.
But they're not good. So you can have an overarching message, kind of like mine is, I really want to help women create financial freedom so that they can live a liberated life. Like, I think that them creating financial freedom allows them to live a liberated life and not to have to depend on anybody else. And it gives them choices. I am doing that by helping them with getting started online and getting through the overwhelm of the technology and things like that. So your messaging is kind of 2 parts. What are you ultimately wanting to do for these, for your clients, and how are you doing that? And you've got to be clear in that in order to attract them. Right.
So if we shift then to the entrepreneur, starting an online business clearly can be overwhelming, especially with this technology piece, and that's your specialty. So what advice would you give to those who are, and it could be just somebody who's doing a mommy blog, like that's their passion. Like, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're starting a business, but that's, they are still struggling with the technology, or it could be a full-fledged entrepreneur who's like, yes, I'm ready. What's your advice for the technology and overwhelm?
Well, I think that it depends on exactly what they're trying to do. But what I see so often is that they're trying to do things too soon. So I am not a big fan of somebody saying, I'm going to start a business, and they go right for spending, $5,000 on a website, or a big branding exercise. So what I see them doing is tackling too much technology too soon, because it's kind of like, they think when you build it, they will come, and it's not the case. The only way you get clients from your website is by generating a bunch of traffic, and there's a whole bunch of stuff that goes into that. And I think that there are simpler ways for them to start building an online presence with not quite as much technology. But I think it really comes down to getting clear first. Like, I think that that's the first thing that they have to figure out, is getting clear on exactly what they're doing and who they're serving. And then you create a strategy in terms of, where are you going to be showing up online? What social media platform makes sense for exactly what you're doing? Because depending on what service you're offering, different social media platforms make more sense. And so, but social media is another one of those areas of the online world that is extremely overwhelming for a lot of people. And what I see is them trying right from the get-go to show up on too many platforms, where it should be like focus on one, master that. As you build your business and as you build your team, you can add more to it. Because in the beginning, when you're a solopreneur, a one-woman show, you have to pick what you're spending your time on, unless you just have absolute freedom in your time. But most women don't. They're trying to start this, with part-time hours. And so you have to be strategic in what you're doing. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. And that leads me to, so what should people focus on when starting online? Because there are so many platforms. Like, I have clients that use Pinterest for their business, or
Yes.
there are other people, we've blabbed before. I've been on Blab with you.
Right.
I've utilized that platform. I have, Facebook, Twitter, there are different people use LinkedIn. So these are all social media platforms, and I'm sure that there's more. Periscope is another one. So there are a lot of social media platforms. And like you said, it's easy to just dig in and do it all. Well, it's not easy, but I mean, it's easy to think that one can, but again, then it's probably spotty at best, because it's like juggling 9 balls when you haven't even mastered just doing 1 or 2. So
Right.
Things are kind of going to fall. So where should people focus when starting online, in not just in social media, but in general?
So when I work with my clients, there's two things that I start out asking them. Okay, so 2 things in terms of, one is, once you figure out who you think your clients are, and I think that that's another thing when you're first starting out, it's not going to be perfect. You're not going to be 100% sure until you start taking action and doing and start working with clients or attracting clients and kind of see. But one of the things is figuring out where your ideal clients are and what social media platform you feel like you can show up on, because it doesn't help you to show up on social media one day and then not again for 2 weeks. So it's got to be something that works for you and makes sense for you, and your clients are showing up. So if you're a photographer, Instagram is obviously a great thing for you. But I have a client, I just got done with a client who, she does mental training for athletes. So when she surveyed some teams that she was working with, Twitter and Instagram were a good platform for her. If you are a blogger or an avid writer, Pinterest can be a great social media platform for you. I'm going through this with a new client right now, and we're in the process of looking at where she thinks her clients are. I will tell you that with today's world, because online, right, we're trying to create relationships. We're trying to create connections and build relationships. Right. And the more that you can be visually visible, the better and quicker you're going to draw an audience. And so what I mean by that is using a platform where they can see you. So maybe, video on YouTube, or using Periscope or Blab or Facebook Live is obviously going to give you a quicker result, because they can see, hear, and connect with you differently than if you're just writing a blog or just posting written post on Twitter or Facebook or something. Right.
And I have a couple colleagues. Well, they have businesses. They're not coaches, but I know one she makes clothing items, and another she makes jewelry, like and high-end jewelry. And so she utilizes Pinterest and Instagram, but also utilizes YouTube, but found that her greater more clients found her through Instagram and through Pinterest because it was shared and shared and shared and shared and shared, right. But not so much through Facebook. Or if she tweeted about it, it would go. It was as a result of the Instagram or the Pinterest, and so that's where the visual cues, like you said, were very, very important for getting, because those were products versus services. And so services, like you said, people are seeing you. You are essentially selling yourself, because you're selling your services. You're selling who you are, the service you provide, the results that those services provide to your clients. And so I definitely can see where that's different. So I think this is amazing information for our listeners who may be either in service-based or product-based businesses. So,
and I will say that, so that's kind of like the first thing in terms of figuring out where you show up. I will say that I haven't really seen a business that can't utilize Facebook in some way. Just having a presence on there can be somewhat of a stopgap. And if you combined it with one of the first things, I think, is offering value, right? And you can do that by setting up a simple lead magnet, so a free offer that they can download on a landing page, and an email marketing system. Like, those three things can get somebody started in selling their services without going to the expense of a website. And what I didn't say earlier about why I'm not a big fan of that is, I don't think that when you're first starting out, you have enough clarity in terms of what you're offering to know exactly what to put on your website. And I think that will change. Your website is going to evolve as you evolve always, right? And so if you've got somebody, especially if they are not technically savvy, and
right.
They have somebody else build their website, and once they start, getting a bunch of clients, their services may evolve, or they may tweak things, and then they've got to have somebody, they've got to invest in somebody to change their website because it doesn't match. I see it over and over again with clients, and with women that I've talked to who have gone the route of doing a website in the beginning, and they're like, it doesn't match what I'm doing, or it doesn't portray, the image that I want to portray. And so that's why I'm not a big fan at the beginning, because while you think the first part is you getting clarity, but you gain more clarity as you work with more clients. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So, as part of this seeker's journey, I've heard many people say, leap and the net will appear. And I don't know if that's true for everybody, because it really, sometimes the net doesn't appear because there's lessons to be learned, right? So I get that. So what, and that's something that they evolve through. And for other people, if they're on the right path and they're in alignment, I strongly believe, maybe that's debatable, but I think that, whether there's a net or not, I think leaping is a trend that we hear in the industry. Go after what you want. And clearly there's fear. Everybody struggles with fear of, what's the next step, but leaping, taking the opportunity to move forward. What are your thoughts about leaping without a net? Because that was your experience.
Yeah. I will tell you that, that wasn't my initial plan. And it is not, I think that you have to really understand, part of being an entrepreneur and being successful is really understanding yourself and your patterns and understanding what I call your risk muscle, right? And the journey of an entrepreneur, you have to get what I like to call get cozy with being uncomfortable. There's going to be lots of places that you're going to be uncomfortable as you're building your business. Leaping without a net is certainly an extremely uncomfortable place, and it was for me. And it has been kind of a roller coaster over the last couple years. I mean, I've had months where, because because I wasn't putting myself out there, that I would have $342 in my checking account, not having any idea where the next, client was coming from. And so it's extremely uncomfortable. And when you're in those places where your money is so erratic and you don't know where your next client is coming from and you're not pushing yourself to take action, you get into an energy of desperation, and that people are going to feel that energy. And so you're actually repelling clients. So even though I jumped without a net, it was an extremely uncomfortable process for me. And it is not something that I really recommend if you don't have to. Now, there are people who, will get extremely motivated and action oriented when they've got a fire under their butt like that, right?
Right.
But it's really, do you know yourself well enough to know whether you're going to be on that side of the fence or whether you're just going to completely shut down? You've got to know that, right?
Right.
So my preference would be that you don't jump without some kind of a net, a savings. I certainly think that you can build a business part-time. I put myself through college part-time while I was working full-time. And then part of it, I was going to school full-time and working full-time. I think that you can. It just has to be a priority, and there may be part of your process or part of your journey where you have to say no to other things to be able to do that. But I think that if you can start to build your business while you still have some sense of security and a foundation, it's a more comfortable place.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love what you said, because I completely agree. You've got to know where you are, which side of the fence you'll be on, because there are some people that just thrive on that. And they're like, all right, zero money, let's do this. And then there are some people that just absolutely get paralyzed by fear and go into that state of desperation. And so knowing yourself, again, this goes back to knowing who you are at the very core. Because for those who don't know who they are and, call it naivete, like, oh, I'm going to build a business, not really knowing, because it's about the business, but in the service-based world, it's so much more about knowing you. Knowing who you want to serve is important. And that's why I think the 4 pillars of clarity that you gave are so important, because knowing who you are is the foundation of building your business. I've known even real estate agents, so they kind of know who their clients are. They're the people who are either buying or selling a house, so right. You don't need a very specific demographic for that. But you've also got to build relationships, and building relationships depends on who you are and your personality, and cultivating the relationships with your potential clients, and really having the ability to do that and to nurture the relationships and also foster growth within those relationships, because that's how you get referrals. That's how your business grows. And we are now, and what you're talking about is the technology aspect, but the way that businesses used to grow was by referral or by paper ads. And now it's also by referral and testimonials, but also by getting the message out there of who you are, who you serve. And that is primarily done through social media and through technology, because that's the new wave.
And like I was saying earlier, like I think that sometimes, they try to take on too much technology too soon. And so I do think that one of the things that a mentor or a coach can help in the beginning, because I spent so long just spinning my wheels trying to figure it all myself, I think that they can help you to figure out a more streamlined path and help you to know what things to focus on and what things you don't need to focus on yet. But I also think that some of those, what I'll say, old models of networking still work, even though you're a coach, consultant, service-based business. Networking offline still has a place. Like I just got back Sunday from 11 days in New Orleans. I went down originally just for a long weekend because my friends were getting married, but I decided to stay the rest of the week, which as an entrepreneur, we have that flexibility, to do that. It's one of the
Perks.
Yeah, it's one of the perks, right? We want to do this because it gives us a certain freedom to do what we want to do. So I spent 10 days down there. And while I was down there, meeting new people and things, I got a client from offline networking with just talking to people, that I was hanging out with at the wedding and connecting with people that way. And I have a mentor who talks about if you need a client quickly and you need to bring cash into your business, go talk to people in person. And I was at a 3-day conference the weekend before I went to New Orleans. And as much as I love how much we can connect with people from all over the world online, there's still nothing like connecting with somebody in person. Last October, I had the chance to meet a number of women that I had met online from all over. There's a handful of us, and now that we connected in person, we connect online in a very different way. So that in-person network and connection is still a really, really viable way to get clients.
Right. Absolutely. And I think that just focusing on one area and not the other can minimize your chances of getting clients, because having the face-to-face interaction is just as important as the online presence. So, and so that's where doing both is really advantageous. So yes. I completely agree. So, for our listeners who may just be starting out in terms of demystifying the technology, and you had mentioned earlier that having the website is not necessarily the first step, but getting a lead magnet out there and connecting. So what do you think, what would be the best viable option for them? So specifically service-based, because product-based folks, you can,
different.
Yeah, it's a little different. You can put your product out there and people can like the product and buy it just because they see it, they want it, and it's shipped, it's tangible. So for service-based businesses, where would you recommend they begin in online? Because again, if they're going to networking events face to face, it's a little different. But in terms of demystifying, eradicating the startup and technology overwhelm, what would be your top 2 or 3 steps for them to take today?
So the whole goal in the beginning is for you to get in front of your ideal clients and to show your value. So figure out what platform online that you want to show up in, right? Where your ideal clients are going to be. And then start offering free value in just sharing tips and things like that. Create a lead magnet. And when you're creating a lead magnet, it needs to be something that is valuable but easily consumable. Like a 100-page ebook is not a great it's not a great lead magnet, because I can't remember where I read it, but I think it was a couple years ago. I read a statistic that like 70% of the lead magnets downloaded never even get opened. So you want it to be something that is easily digestible so that they can see your value. So checklists are great. You can do a short audio series or a short video series, just something that is a quick consumable. But you want it to be strategic when you're thinking about the value that you're going to offer in this lead magnet, because you want to think about it in terms of what service are you going to offer for sale at the end of your sales funnel, basically. What service are you going to offer basically at the end? And where are your people starting? Or what information would you want them to know at the beginning of the journey and getting to know you? And build your free lead magnet content with that in mind. Does that make sense?
Yeah. That's amazing.
And then, there's easy ways to do that. I mean, I just opened up a lead magnet from a woman that I am a fan of, and it was a simple 3-page Word document. It wasn't even visually that appealing. I mean, she may have had a few areas where there were different colored fonts, but I mean, it really was just a 3-page Word document that was basically a checklist. So it doesn't have to be super fancy, because I think people are looking at some of the people that they admire online and where they are now, and they're comparing their now to, that person's now, which is not the same.
Comparisonitis.
Yeah,
Don't
exactly.
compare your beginning to someone else's middle.
Exactly. But I mean, you could also use Canva, right? Canva would allow you to make a document a little prettier if that's really super important to you. But don't get hung up on it. You can create a lead magnet in like 3 hours. And then find an easy landing page platform to use. Lead Pages is super popular, but there's also Page Whiz and some other ones that are easy.
ClickFunnels?
ClickFunnels is slightly different, but yes, you can use ClickFunnels. Okay. It's a little more expensive. So, and that's the one thing I will say about some of this technology. Really understand that each one of these services that you're using are going to have some sort of a monthly or annual fee. And so you want to take that into consideration when you're looking at your beginning budget, because I think people don't realize it and they start signing up for all these things and their monthly expenses start to increase.
Right.
So, really think about what it is that you need to have, because your email system is going to cost you a monthly fee too, right?
Right.
So you just need to create your lead magnet. You need an email marketing system like ConvertKit, ActiveCampaign, MailChimp, Aweber, something like that. And you need a landing page for them to sign up for and join your list. And you need a way to send them the download.
Dee, we're out of time already. Can you believe how fast that went?
It did go fast, and I hope that we gave enough of the technical tips and things to help with the overwhelm.
Where can people find you to connect with you?
They can find me at deereller.com. It's DEERELLER.com. Or they can find me on Facebook. My page is facebook.com DeerellerCC.
Okay.
And they can find me on Twitter and Periscope at Reller.
Awesome.
So everything's under my name.
Awesome. Awesome. I'm so glad that you took the time today. I appreciate you so much. And thank you for sharing with the listeners today how to eradicate the startup and technology overwhelm. Thank you everyone for listening. It's been another great show. To continue the conversation, hop on over to the Seekers group on Facebook, www.facebook.com/groups/The Seekers Path. And until next time, just keep remembering that you are meant for more and keep seeking. Bye everyone. See you next week.
Thank you, Kristen.
Thanks for tuning in to Meant for More, the Seeker's Guide to Success. But the fun doesn't end here. Head over to KristenLloyd.com for your Seeker's Guide workbook filled with exercises to help you go from mediocre to magically magnificent.